Greetings and welcome to Sports 101, the sports show that discusses sports beyond the X's and O's. We like to include our conversation to include the history, past, and in the making of sports. Remember, we like to look at sports from our 4 P's: people, places, perspectives, and point of views. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me at Twitter at Coach_Harp412. Also, make sure you get social and follow SportsZone Chicago and its wide variety of shows. SportsZone Chicago can be found at on Twitter at SportsZone Chicago, on Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram under the same moniker at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, SportsZone Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show, Sean and Maya in the Morning, or a wide variety of the other shows by logging on. Keep up with breaking sports news. And if you missed a show, please listen to the podcast or watch videos on our YouTube channel. Please download the Sports Zone app. The Sports Zone app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now, I would like to introduce tonight's episode. Tonight, we'll be discussing the WNBA and its position of branding within the women's sports spectrum. Let's talk about women's sports for a minute. When most people talk women's sports, what's the sport that's brought up first? Usually, the United States women's soccer team. Why is that? In this show, we'll delve into that and hopefully get an answer that everyone can understand. Unlike the men's game, if you look at men's basketball in the United States, and we go back to the Dream Team, after the Dream Team era, the Redeem Team and some other teams face stauncher opposition from European basketball. European basketball began to grow after that Dream Team Olympics in Barcelona. So again, that spectrum of basketball became, greater competition. So now when the United States will play Spain, you might see, Serge Ibaka and the Gasol brothers, various other NBA stars and the European teams, and the games became really close. It's not like that in the women's game. In women's basketball, United States women are clearly a class of their own. The United States women's basketball team is the most successful, not only women's sports team, but the sports team, period. Here's a picture of United States women's sports team, and you can see a litany of stars that you may remember from college or the WNBA. Again, all these women are a class of their own, and not only do they play for the United States team, but they play in the WNBA, and most of them play in Europe as well, because women have to play year-round due to their low salaries. The United States women's team, the last 10 Olympic tournaments, they've won 8 out of them. So they're 8 of 10 in the Olympics. Their Olympic record in total is 66-3. 66 wins and 3 losses. 8 out of the past FIBA World Cups they have won, including the last 3. So United States women's Olympic basketball team is clearly a class of its own, and it's been that way for a long time. Now let's talk about the United States women's soccer team, who are also great, but their greatness is in such a shorter time span. The United States women's soccer team overshadows basketball not only in marketing, but in fan appeal, videos, documentaries, appearances on television and other media formats. And we're about to talk about that. United States women, remember, soccer is a global game for men, but for women, they just start playing the game on an international level in, let's say, the mid 70s to 80s per se, competitively. So in 1985, the United States women's national team started to play. Remember, global soccer then followed Title IX. Title IX was a court decision in the United States in 1972, which called for equal opportunity in sports, meaning the women needed to have the same number of scholarships as the men. Um, Obviously, international sports didn't follow this because United States women's team didn't start playing until 1985. In 1988, they played in a women's tournament in China. This is a precursor to the Women's World Cup. It wasn't quite named that yet, but as a startup team, they lost to Norway in the quarterfinals. That's pretty good, being one of your first international tournaments. Um, Obviously, the inaugural World Cup was won against China in 1990. That was, an epic game. You can see this is one of the, I believe this is the 85 team. The 90 team is often characterized by uh, Brianna Scurry's saves in the PK shootout to win the game. And she was often criticized by the scowl she gave. She got some of the same negative connotations that black male athletes get when they show enthusiasm, references to animals, people feeling that they're threatened of her on a sporting pitch. All right. So after that, the United States women's national team total, they've won 4 gold medals and 8 CONCACAF gold medals. CONCACAF is the qualifying region that the United States play in. That stands for Caribbean and North American, soccer federations. Remember, the subject-verb agreement is different in other languages, so it comes out CONCACAF. The United States women's team also ranked consistently in the top 4 in the world, usually top 3, with their main competitors being Germany, China, and France. Originally, it was Brazil, but they've been overpassed due to the size and strength of not only the United States but some of the other women's teams in Europe. Um, this women's team has experienced great media coverage. Their World Cups were sponsored by ESPN, ABC, and Univision. So basically, the World Cup is sponsored by Disney and Univision, which is a channel that broadcasts in Spanish. So that's how much the United States World Cup was thought of, even in its early inception and being played for 10 to 20 years or so. I remember basketball was played longer. United States women's basketball team has a longer track record of success, and they still don't get the notoriety. Some of the other characters from that 1990 team, you got Mia Hamm, now Mia Garcia Parra. She married one of those Red Sox players, and a lot of women on that team also led to the foundation of the women's professional league here in the United States. So that 1990 team was not only instrumental in winning, but they paved the pathway for professional soccer in the United States. A quick fact is, what a lot of people don't realize is the women's professional soccer gained a ground quicker than MLS. Except the league, it would, flutter from time to time based off sponsorship and just recognition on TV. But it actually was going, longer because the United States men's team didn't have the same success. Now let's look at the 2015 World Cup. That's where United States women, it was another element in regards to how they made their name. The 2015 Women's World Cup was the most watched. The final was the most watched soccer match in history, and that's men's or women's. That's an astonishing feat because the men's game had a lot of great legends. You got Diego Maradona, Pele, some of the great French stars, Thierry Henry. You got your German stars. So it was a lot of good European and international men that played in the final. And yet this final was the most viewed with 23 million viewers. In this game, the United States beat Japan, and this whole tournament that they played in was very technical. I mean, it was a vast comparison to when they first started. They were bigger, faster, and stronger than most of their competition. They played with a flair similar to what you find in European soccer, where they just dominated the ball. Um, Again, this game had higher ratings than the NBA and Stanley Cup Finals. So again, that shows you the magnitude of the 2015 World Cup Final when you can outdraw the NBA and Stanley Cup Finals. With hockey and basketball being great, considered the top three sports in this country. The 1999 team again, they were so instrumental. There's so many documentaries that have been written about them and books as well. The first one, there's a book on the 1999 team, and there's a documentary called Dare to Dream. It's named this title because, again, uh, before this team, women's international soccer was not well known. It wasn't, prevalent in the community. In the United States community, and it was a very hard road to pave. Some of these women quit full time jobs and were playing with little or no pay, just training at the training facility. Remember, this is before they start winning, and they just faced a lot of adversity that you wouldn't expect to face playing for your country, especially when your country is supposedly, the greatest, country, on earth, but yet it can't support its women's national team. So with all those trials and tribulations, they still made it through the World Cup and came out victorious. ESPN has produced a special on them called the 99ers, and that talks about the women of this team. You can see Mia Hamm, Brianna Scary, a lot of other notable names that were instrumental in this win. There's all, like I said, there was a book wrote about it, and they've been celebrated, ever since this time. They not only do they have reunions, but they're actually stars. They're considered the four I don't want to say forefathers, but the founders of women's soccer, because again, a lot of these women quit their jobs, played with little or no pay, and they set it up. So right now, the United States Federation will have to respect them. We'll go into this a little later on. They're still kind of fighting for equality. They actually recently sued the United States Federation in regards to pay. Obviously, as I stated earlier, they have a lot more wins than the United States men's team. Not only wins, but World Cups and just other awards. And yet they're not paid the same. So, that's obviously a travesty. So, again, we're back to our question. Why does soccer get more coverage and basketball is older and more successful? Now, I'm going to give you the words, not from me, but from two people I think would know about this. They're a celebrity power couple. I'm talking about I'm talking about Raponi and Sue Bird, Megan Raponi and Sue Bird. Sue Bird is a former UConn standout. She's a four-time WNBA champion, and she recently just won the championship. And her girlfriend, Megan Rapinoe, is co-captain of the United States women's soccer team. Megan Rapinoe, she spent quarantine in a bubble with Sue Bird. They were engaged to be married before the season started. So the WNBA let her stay in a bubble with Sue. And in a bubble, she wrote a lot of commentary. She used to do articles from the sideline and just talk about her perspective. And oftentimes it talked about things that, we normally don't like to talk about.
So I got to do this because you're often great with names, but her name is so awesome. Her name is Rapinoe.
Okay.
But you're right. From a phonetic standpoint, you would think that's how you say it. But it's
Okay.
Megan Rapinoe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is my sensei, Maya Kai. She's been guiding me on my podcast journey and strengthening my broadcasting sword. Thank you, Maya.
Yes, and you've been giving me information to flex my brain. Like I go into conversations like I know what I'm talking about because of you. All right, back to Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird. All right.
Okay, thank you so much. So
Always, yes.
Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird, they were engaged in 2020, right before this season started. So Megan decided to live in a bubble with Sue. Um, Megan is not only, again, she's the co-captain of the women's national team, but she's a Black Lives Matter activist. In 2016, she was the first non-African athlete to take a knee for Colin Kaepernick. Um, she's very outspoken, sometimes criticized for her dress and apparel. Um, I like to use the reference most people talk about at the ESPYS when she wore some leather shorts and a men's blazer with no shirt underneath it. And, she was frowned upon by the establishment. Um, Another fact about her, once she started kneeling, what the women's teams would do on an international and domestic level, they would start playing a national anthem while her team was in the locker room. Also, United States Soccer, they imposed a rule stating that if you want to represent the national team on any level, that you can't kneel. If you kneel, you're kicked off the team. That's very funny because, right now, if you look at Europe and all around the soccer world, everyone is kneeling for the social injustices that happen in the United States. Yet the United States athletes cannot kneel due to a rule imposed by their own federation. Just something that makes you say, hmm. Again, Rapinoe, she's a advocate for gender equality, and she was one of the players that filed a lawsuit last year against the United States Soccer for pay discrimination. The basis of the lawsuit was we're the best team in women's soccer. Uh, we've won the World Cup the last 3 years. We have the best player, and we're paid a fourth of what the United States men's team is paid. Before, the narrative was told to us that if you produce and you win, then we'll increase your pay. That has not happened yet. They do get a lot of exposure, and oftentimes they'll make their money off of endorsements. So, for example, the highest paid women's player may have made like 500,000 in salary, and through endorsements. And this is Megan Rapinoe. If you ever wanted to research her, her net worth I think was around 2 million, but that's only 500,000 in salary. And again, she is the co-captain of the United States women's national team, the most decorated women's soccer team, ever. And yet, it's hard for her to get paid by her federation. Um, the women's basketball team is also very much underpaid compared to the men. Yet they won't be hosted. They're not hosted by their federation on the same issues. So FIBA and FIBA's branch in the United States won't even host the women to talk about this. Now, when we the look at the disparity in regards to race on both teams, we can start to see some similarities. Um, Again, I talked about Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird, and they're dating and living in a bubble, which they called the W. We're calling it the Dub, and they used to talk about getting more coverage. And they did Megan wrote an article one day talking about this, and then Sue was asked about it, and she backed up her partner or her future wife's comments. Um, Megan and Bird basically told us while soccer gets more coverage, yet basketball is more successful. So in this interview, Megan stated that we won our way and we were ourselves. What does she mean by that? They won their way and they were themselves, meaning they displayed their sexuality openly. Oftentimes in women's sports, that was frowned upon. If you look at the WNBA when it first started out in its inception, oftentimes the camera would pan away from the crowd and always focus on the court. So I remember about 2006, I was in class in my master's program at Grambling State University under Dr. Chevelle Hall, and we looked at this, and what we found out was ABC, who is underneath Disney, they didn't want to broadcast a lot of the women holding hands and kissing. Now, at this time, the Houston Comets were the best team, and they were a predominantly black team. Cheryl Swoops was their main player. And Houston, if you look at the demographic of Houston, there would be a lot of gay black women that came to the game, will hold hands, embrace in public, and that wasn't the image that they wanted for the WNBA, in particular to the demographic that was paying for tickets, which they wanted a cookie cutter league where they can get white families from the suburb to bring their daughters to have someone to emulate. However, the league turned very much into what the NFL and NBA is, predominantly individuals of African descent with European spectators. What Rapinoe said is her team, they supported gender issues. She openly said their goal was to support gender issues, female excellence, queer excellence, and talk about the LGBT community openly and give a voice. She also stated the basketball players weren't able to do that. Um, they talked. Then she started to talk about the country had real history of racism and homophobic issues. And then she just let the cat out the bag. And she said that the real reason that the WNBA is not looked at the same as United States women's soccer team, because even though they're gay and they openly display that, and the things that they wear and what they say and what they champion, they're still white girls and they're small. The WNBA are big black gay women, and the perception is that's not marketable to the audience that they want to reach. And remember, they want to look at a suburb cookie cutter audience. Um, she also stated soccer is getting more racially diverse. However, most people still love that girl next door persona that's associated with women's soccer.
You know, one of the things that Megan Rapinoe said that I can agree with, because here's what's interesting about WNBA, and this actually has come out in conversations like with Candace Parker and players who are heterosexual, feeling like there is this, and Skylar Diggins, like there is this idea that if you are a WNBA player, then you must be gay.
Yeah.
I mean, automatically, like that is like, and that's like a stereotype that's put there, which is interesting because what I've noticed with soccer, there is no necessary stereotype of what your sexual preference is.
Well, the one thing that if you look at the WNBA, that is so far from the truth. In actuality, the WNBA is based off of the women that are that like men or discriminated against. They're picked on, they're bullied. Actually, a few of them have quit the league because they stated that if you're a straight woman, it's uncomfortable for you.
Yes.
And then when you look at soccer, again, they openly flaunt their sexuality and say we're here for queer issues. And Megan Rapinoe said it best. People just don't pay attention to that because they're small white girls.
And I think, and the thing about it is, I respected it when she said that, because there goes that conversation about privilege that pretty much she was saying, as being white females, that we can be this way and it's non-threatening. It's, we can turn a blind eye. Now, mind you, like you said, media didn't want to necessarily show that. They didn't put people in the stands. But what's interesting is, you know, you've got tons of young girls that play soccer, starting really young. So when she said that, I was like, she said something that most people will never say, that they're still not being pigeonholed the same way that WNBA players are. And you just look at the racial disparity of being WNBA predominantly black females versus soccer being predominantly white females.
And even to go with that, they even let instances of domestic violence go with this team. If you look at the episodes of their goalie Hope Solo,
yes,
with so many incidents of domestic violence, if a man would have did that, they would have called for him to be suspended without pay.
Well, I remember Brittany Griner had some issues, and it was like lots of spotlight put on it. But for some reason, even though Hope Solo, her boyfriend, I'm not sure they got married, he was actually he was an NFL player. He was black.
He played for the Seahawks.
Seahawks, right? So it was interesting how that kind of got skirted. It was talked about, but you're right. because she was actually the aggressor
She's showing up with guns, beating him up.
She was the aggressor, and it was interesting how that played out. But you're right, reverse the roles of the aggressor, and it probably has an entirely different narrative altogether. All right,
Definitely. So again, when we look at this, basically all she's saying is that gay, tall black men and black women need support as well within the sports spectrum. So she did also end up saying that. She said it's true. Sue Bird confirmed that, saying that, and this is her fiance, one of the Yukon greats, a USA great. She stated that the NBA is 80% black and media coverage is lacking in that. She also said networks don't like to show spectators and stands due to all, women kissing. So this is an issue that we must have to tackle as a society and just, deal with that. We have to let go of the notion, similar to the way the United States let go of the notion that, professionals can't play in the Olympics because they were losing. We have to let go of this notion that women's sports can't be viewed by straight women, gay women, and children, and it's not quote unquote leading them to a path of destruction. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to finish our show and we're going to talk about branding in the WNBA. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
See me. See me.
See me. See my dark skin and my kinky hair.
See me. Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my tan skin and my curly hair.
See me.
Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my face, wet with tears from years of oppression.
See my hands, weathered and worn from decades of pulling myself up through your society.
See my feet split from centuries of walking your delicate line.
See me.
See me.
See me.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
Greetings and welcome back. I am Jamar Harp, and this is Sports 101, the show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. We like to look at the game from the people, places, perspectives, and point of view, using a historic lens to evaluate sport in the past, present, and future. Again, please make sure you get social and follow this show and all the other shows on SportsZone Chicago on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app via the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Before we begin, I would like to take a quick moment to talk about the last broadcast that we just saw. So many times people say that they don't see color, but we need you to see color, hear the people, listen to them, and understand them, so that way we can move forward. So it is truly, we can make this country great like it has never been. Now back to our show. I would like to talk about branding in the WNBA. When we look at branding in sports, we all know that women's sports pales. But when we look at the WNBA, it gets even worse. Currently, the WNBA has developed a new moniker, and what they said is they want to focus their branding to build a cultural relevance in its product. So if you look at this picture coming up, this is at one of the basketball games, and this is the halftime entertainment. When you see it, it's basically a gentleman with his shirt off dancing around. This picture does not represent the product the WNBA puts out. Number one, he's a man. This is a Minnesota Lynx game, nor does he demonstrate the cultural dynamic on the court. Remember, the WNBA is 80% Black women. Of those Black women, there's a large percentage that are in the gay community. Not all. Remember, we discussed before break that straight women are often ostracized in the WNBA. Again, this picture shows that the narrative that they're putting out doesn't fit what they're actually doing. An actual narrative that would work would be something that showed acceptance to minorities in the league, women in general, the Black women, and everyone in the LGBT community. Again, they're not doing this because they've been hiding this community within the WNBA for almost 20 years, which hurts his brand because it can evolve. Sue Bird, who we talked about in our last segment, she also stated she was used for a cookie cutter marketing program in the past that failed. And she said the reason they failed is because they don't use the primary demographic group in the league. So think of the commercials when Keith Van Horn first came in the NBA. They were showing like in the old Hoosiers type setting with Converses, real short shorts. He was supposed to be the quote unquote savior or the next big, white name, the new Larry Bird, different monikers they tried to give to him. Yet his play did not match up to the marketing. So they used Sue Bird in a similar vein, yet it failed due to the demographic of the league and most people that watch it. Um, Now let's talk about some initiatives that they started that are actually trying to help this league grow. Um, After doing research, they found that most people that support the WNBA are between, I believe, 15 and 36 of age, with a large percentage of them belonging to the LGBT community. Again, that demographic, regardless of their sexuality, is heavy in the social media. So what the WNBA did is they partnered with Twitter. Um, the main issue that was going on with the WNBA, obviously in other sports as well, is a predominantly black playing crowd or athletes and a predominantly white audience. And again, this is common in most sports, except gender is a factor here because, again, we talked about how the white women, regardless of their sexuality, are more accepted. They get marketing opportunities. Oftentimes, they'll get different opportunities overseas. In some leagues overseas, there's a cap on how many people you can have internationally, and especially Americans who they don't want to dominate the league. So depends on where you're playing. If they do take an American, they might want an American that can blend in with their current team, or they may want an American that will stand out. Either way, there's less opportunities of women of color to make money overseas playing basketball, which obviously hurts their bottom line because, again, the WNBA salaries pale in comparison to what the men make. Again, this predominant white fan base, they don't want their children or grandchildren seeing women kissing and showing affection, especially black women kissing and showing affection. They feel that this will influence their children's lifestyles and turn them into being, that way, which I disagree with. I think that's ignorant notion to think, especially in 2020, and just really shows how narrow-minded we still are and how far we do have to come. We have to just keep pushing and getting information out, and eventually, people will hopefully come around. So what the WNBA did was they partnered with Twitter and they decided to stream 10 live games via Twitter. Now, these live games they streamed via Twitter were very unique. They weren't like how the NFL streams games. They used technology. So they had basically they made the game like a podcast. So the fans can interact with the broadcasters. They could post in game. The broadcasters will respond while the team was on the court. So they used technology, and it was great. They made the WNBA like a big podcast. After finding out their target audience was, again, from around 13 to 15 to 36, they wanted to use this because in their local arenas, attendance, fluctuates depending on, who's in town, what city it is, etc. The WNBA also, to appeal to this young target market, they decided to step into the video game realm. Now, this was historic because these pro leagues have been around for a long time, and video games have as well. And for the first time for the women to be considered in 2020, I think that's very sad. In 2020, that was the first year the WNBA was added to NBA 2K. That's the popular basketball game that's out right now. And they were added in a mode where you could play 3-on-3. It wasn't, quite the full game, but at least, they were added. I kind of looked at it as when I play FIFA and I look for my African teams and it's like 4 listed. And I'm saying, why can't all these teams be listed if they're, they're qualified? It was the same way in 2K. A lot of women wanted to play with a women character and play a season of a WNBA, not just a 3-on-3 game. Candace Parker, who's a big-time WNBA superstar, one of the great Tennessee Vols, who played under, rest in peace, Coach Pat Summitt, who was a pioneer coach in the game. She stated her dream growing up as a little girl was to get her own sneaker and be in a video game. That's what she wanted. Why do you think she wanted that? That's what most males want. If you want to be a superstar in your sport, you want to get, your sneaker and have your likeness in a video game and argue about someone that your overall rating, should be higher. Um, Once this started to happen after 2000, there was a lot of misogynistic messages from males stating that why can't they just have their own separate game, the WNBA? Why do they have to be on this game? They don't need this. No one wants to watch it. Again, just putting more fuel on a fire, um, trying to keep these women down and broadcast the game. In Europe, women's sports and particularly women's basketball is, adored just like men's basketball. So we need to get to that notion here in the United States where we can have our women shine not only in basketball but soccer, whatever sport they choose to play. Hopefully, if I have a daughter one day and she wants to play sports, she can live in a world where she's not, regardless of her gender, excuse me, of her sexuality, and regardless of what sport she plays, she can get into a sport and grow and have no restrictions, just like a son of mine. And I think that's very important. We should work towards that. Um, in 2000, in the next NBA 2K, which debuts tomorrow, it starts with NBA 2K1. They've increased it and they added 3 WNBA focused game modes. The first one is called the W, and that is a WNBA version of a My Player, which is basically a career mode. So you can create, a basketball player somewhat to your likeness, and she can be a woman, and it'll be a full season of, WNBA, basketball with trades and everything that goes on in the regular NBA 2K in the men's career mode. They also have a W online mode. In this mode, you can create a player and play on 3 games. Again, this is kind of similar to the Volta mode in FIFA. However, I kind of frown upon it because the 3-on-3 game, when you're trying to market the holistic women's game, kind of downplays it. And when there's already a negative perception, you don't want people thinking, well, this is all they can do is play 3-on-3. Already people say the court is too big, make it smaller, make the rim lower. They don't dunk. It's not exciting, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think the 3-on-3 mode was a good idea. The last mode that they added was called My WNBA. And My WNBA was a league simulator where you could control a team throughout the season. So basically, you're playing a season where you just control a team, their finances, trades. You play the games not as a single player, but you control the whole team. Attorney Elena Glass, who is innovative. She's an up and coming innovator in women's sports. She has an interesting story. She was the manager at the University of Minnesota women's basketball team for 3 years, and then she became a member of the team her senior year. After that, she went to law school, and currently she's an agent and sports writer. She contributes to Forbes Online for her sports section and has great statistics on this subject matter. Her next goal is to become an owner in the WNBA, and she's been working towards that. She's already met with key officials in the WNBA that are welcoming a Black woman as an owner. Again, this is historic because the NBA, even with they do have Black ownership, but the WNBA is really being aggressive in regards to getting a diversified group of ownership, because again, I think they realize that it kind of looks bad having most of the teams are owned by either the NBA team or another team, in that city, and the owners treat it, second class. They don't give as much support or hands-on involvement as they do with the men's game. So Ms. Glass states that 80% of the sports writers are white males, and that's why the narrative of the WNBA is what it is. Um, they don't see it through the lens of women that are trailblazers, and they don't see it through the lens of women that are professional athletes, just like the men, college graduates, just like the men, have been playing since 6 or 7, just like the men, where the men may get 10, 15 million a year. They're struggling to get $1 million, and they live in the United States just like the men have to pay the same type of bill. So these beat writers don't understand their plight, and oftentimes when they write these articles, putting them down, they just add more fuel on the fire that keeps that money away from them, which they're working so hard to achieve.
How much do you think, and I just did a podcast about this with a good friend of mine who's a behavioral analyst, and we talked about the narrative of the angry Black woman or the emasculating Black woman. So when you talk about 80% of the writers being male, probably white males, is it safe to say they're probably seeing many of the WNBA players in a very kind of tunnel vision in regards to, we could get back to saying, ain't I a woman? You know what I'm saying? Kind of thing with Sojourner Truth. And it's interesting because if you notice, if you have a WNBA player that kind of breaks the mold, like you talk about the likes of Skylar Diggins, Swin Cash, Candace Parker, I feel they have gotten more opportunities beyond just being WNBA players than just regular WNBA players, so to speak.
Definitely. If you look at Swin Cash, McKeesport native, another UConn great. She's from the Pittsburgh area. A lot of these athletes, you got to remember when they were in college, even though they knew they were going to go pro, they studied and put more effort into their classes because it wasn't, I can do this and make millions. I'm going to go pro, but I still need something to fall back on. Secondly, when you look at it, they were outspoken and doing these things while they were still playing. If you look at the current WNBA players, oftentimes they speak out on social activism than NBA players, and they put action behind their words. And that's what causes these beat writers to in turn spurn them in their verbiage.
I remember when I was doing a show on 1690 WVON, and we had Swin Cash on as a guest. And this was right about when Skylar Diggins was coming out of Notre Dame. And I said to her, and she got really offended, but I don't think she understood my question. I said, do you think Skylar Diggins coming into the league and kind of how she, at that time, I think she had gotten affiliated with Jay-Z. And his sports marketing kind of endeavor, so to speak. I'm like, do you think kind of this will kind of give a different look to the WNBA? And she got really upset with me. And I was like, whoa. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, but there tends to be one perspective of what the WNBA is. You know what I mean? I'm like, do you think bringing in someone like Skylar Diggins can say, hey, guess what? We're just like anybody else, regardless to what our sexual orientation is. We're here, we play, we're still athletes. But I think she took exception to the fact that I questioned that Skylar Diggins was more of, I'm gonna be real talk, she was opposite of what you generally saw being marketed for the WNBA.
Yeah. Well, when you look at Skylar Diggins, a lot of women athletes, I think, kind of frown upon her because even when she was in college, she was known more for her looks than her basketball skills. And she's a tremendous basketball player.
See, and see, here goes the unfairness of it all. So, and interesting, even though I think it led with that, and I'm pretty sure that's why Jay-Z jumped right on trying to market her. I'll be honest, I don't think necessarily she's had the most lucrative financially career in the WNBA as I thought she would have had because of kind of that, like you said, she was very attractive. Beyond that, I think Swin Cash has always, to me, I have no idea what her sexual orientation is. I have no idea and didn't care. But I notice even now, after not being an active player, she's still, I see her in commercials and doing things. So it's about that marketability, about just putting yourself out there without being pigeonholed by the idea that if you're in the WNBA, then you must be gay, you must be a lesbian, because that's the image that comes with that.
Well, I know another thing that's contributing to that is the time when they were in the league. When you look when Swin was playing, the players weren't as outspoken as they are now.
Yes.
So when you look at the current players, Skylar Diggins is at the forefront, leading everything, and she's a straight woman in the WNBA. So not only does she get criticism from her fellow athletes in the league, but for which she advocates, the sports writers, tear her down too. So that's not going to lead to a lucrative endorsement contract.
And
Because
I want to say that there was some friction, and you said this earlier about women in the WNBA that were heterosexual. Like they felt like they were kind of given flack. I think Maya Moore spoke on this.
Yeah, well, it's not that there's sort of friction. They spoke openly about this, being called names, being hit, being bullied, just being picked on because they're straight.
And here it is, we're talking about equality.
Mhm.
And yet there's this issue with the idea of if you're straight, now it's an issue. But like you talked about earlier with soccer, there's no issue whatsoever.
Well, oftentimes with time, these things will happen. If you want to look at the instance right after the Civil War, when they started out building all these HBCUs, the first people to go to them were light skinned blacks. If you're dark skinned, you couldn't go there. So you had that dichotomy in the black community where light skin versus dark skin. And if you look at the WNBA, it's kind of the same thing with the straight versus gay. So after a while, they have to realize that they're all women and they're all oppressed. So let's all work together and let's not pick on each other because her sexual orientation doesn't fit with a predominant orientation of the league.
Or the image that people have decided they're going to imprint on your league. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting. So to do that initial juxtaposition between how soccer, there's not this label of lesbian or gay, yet clearly it's there. Whereas with the WNBA, it's the forefront. It's what their label is, so to speak. So
it's not even just the WNBA on a college level, coaching and being around athletics. A lot of the women's basketball players, they won't, if they're straight, they won't change in the locker room. They go to their room. If they do go to the shower, they'll like not put a sweatsuit on, but cover up because they say that, it's different, being on a women's competitive women's sports team and being a straight woman. They face adversity that no one can think of.
Versus when you're in high school, it's not the same type of environment. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And you're right, because I knew some people when I was at University of Iowa. I was blessed to be there when Vivian Stringer was there.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. They were very good, by the way. And it was interesting. I knew some players that were straight, some that were gay. But it was weird because I felt like they coexisted. But again, that's from the outside looking in. I don't know what it was like, but I never saw. They seemed like they were cohesive, but maybe that was because of who their coach was. You know what I mean, so to speak. So it's interesting. All right, I'm gonna back away because you're getting close to the end of your show.
I am. So one quick point that what Maya was talking about. Oftentimes the straight players, they often talk about being literally physically accosted in some way, or walk by swipes and things of that nature. So this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. In closing, let's talk about our final thoughts. Again, women's sports deserve more recognition. Okay. It's 2020, and if we want to talk about equality, then we have to achieve equality in all areas. And one area that we still need work is the sports spectrum. In regards to gender and race, these Black women need to be allowed to show emotion, not just in basketball, but in other sports, without, as Maya so eloquently stated, being called, aggressive or intimidating. They're just competing like any other athlete. Oftentimes, these women don't want to be called women athletes. They want to be called athletes because that's what they are, athletes. Remember, no matter your sexual affiliation, race and culture should be paramount. Oftentimes, people get into situations because they don't know the hierarchy. When we look at biology, you have kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species. But in regards to people, sometimes we get those mixed up. And when we put different things before our race and our culture, you'll always be behind. We have been shown advancements by soccer players. Now we need to get basketball and WNBA involved. Thank you so much for joining me in this journey today. Remember, tweet and follow us at SportsZone Chicago. You can listen to the show live and put comments, and myself and Maya will respond. You can follow us on Facebook at SportsZone Chicago and on Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, download the app in the iTunes, Google Play, or Amazon stores. Again, my name is Jamar Harp, and this is another episode of Sports 101. I will see you next week. Thank you for coming out. Have a blessed week.
Compassion, noun. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. We're all born with it. It's in us. Don't believe me? When you hear a baby cry, something pulls at you. You want to ease that pain. You want to soothe that hurt. No one had to teach you that. It's called compassion, and it's in you. However, at some point you turned it off when it came to me.
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 The cries of my soul have gone unheard, but today, you will hear me.
My heart has wailed a melody loud enough to shatter your ears, and you ignored me. But this week, you will hear me.
This body has beat the drums of anguish, only to be silenced. But this month, you will hear me.
This year,
This decade,
This century,
I will be heard, and
you will be the one to hear me.
and when I am finally heard,
Show compassion.
show compassion.
show compassion.
Remember,
It's in you.